The first brick came out of the mold, still wet, heavy, fragile. An Israelite prisoner held it in his trembling hands and knew the terrible truth. This brick would not be the last. There would be millions. Millions of bricks made with his own hands, building the fortress of the king who had destroyed his city, massacred his family, deported his entire people. Around him, thousands of other men were doing the same. Jews, Egyptians, Arameans, all slaves, all working to raise something their captors said would last forever. Nineveh, the capital of terror, the year 700 before Christ. But as he pressed the mud into the wooden mold, as the desert sun burned his back, that Israelite prisoner remembered something. Words from a prophet. Words that seemed like madness when he first heard them. Nineveh will fall. It will be dissolved by water and devoured by fire. Of this glorious city, nothing will remain. He looked at the horizon, where the foundations were beginning to rise. How could something so massive fall? But then he remembered that the same God who allowed his deportation had also promised justice, and that God never lied. Then that prisoner did something extraordinary. He smiled, because each brick he placed on that eternal wall was actually one brick closer to the fulfillment of prophecy. King Sennacherib had made a decision that defied logic, to build his new capital on an unstable swamp on the banks of the Tigris River. For any builder of the era, that area was a geographical disaster. Land that flooded every rainy season. Soft ground that sank under any weight. An infinite muddy wasteland with no access to stone quarries. But Sennacherib did not accept reality as a limit. And to accomplish this insanity, he mobilized a workforce that the Bible knows well. Deported prisoners of war. Tens of thousands of men, many coming directly from the lands of Israel and Judah, staring at that infinite muddy swamp. The mission: to fill the entire horizon. They had no machines. They had baskets, backs, and fear. They hauled millions of tons of earth to create a gigantic artificial platform, raising the level of the entire city above the floods. Each man carried his basket hundreds of times a day. For years, Assyrian reliefs show overseers with clubs supervising every step. If the pace slowed, the whip fell. If someone collapsed, they were immediately replaced. Thousands died in this phase, crushed, drowned, executed. But in the end, they achieved the impossible. They created an artificial mountain where before there was only swamp. Now they had the ground, but they were on a plain with no granite or marble quarries. How do you raise the most secure fortress in the world when the only raw material is soft mud? The answer would transform thousands of Israelite prisoners into masters of a brutal technology, turning mud into stone through fire. Organizing tens of thousands of prisoners is not normal administration. It's keeping a volcano under control. Wrong spark and everything explodes in revolt. 40 to 50,000 men eating twice a day. 100,000 meals daily. If food ran out for a single day, revolt was certain. Assyrian records reveal the brutal system. Each ethnic group was kept separate. Israelites in one sector, Egyptians in another, Arameans in yet another. If they didn't speak the same language, they couldn't coordinate to rebel. And they drank thick beer, almost like soup. It wasn't generosity. Fermentation killed bacteria from contaminated water. Beer kept them alive long enough to finish the walls. Brick was primary, but they needed timber for gates and roofs. Sennacherib sent expeditions to Lebanon to cut the famous cedars. These trees were so enormous, they needed teams of 300 men to drag a single trunk to the river. If the raft capsized and the wood sank, the entire team was executed. For critical foundations, they needed limestone from 50 kilometers away. Wood sleds pulled by hundreds of men over rollers lubricated with oil. The macabre detail: if a roller broke under the weight, the sled crushed dozens in a second. Fatal accidents occurred several times a week. Sennacherib created layered supervision. Local overseers whipped workers. Assyrian officers monitored overseers. Royal engineers reviewed progress. The king made surprise inspections. If a section failed, not only did the worker die, the overseer died, the officer, sometimes the engineer. It was vertical terror that guaranteed no one dared make mistakes. Legends say the walls were so thick that 3 chariots could race on top. When they were excavated, reality was even more terrifying. Sennacherib was building a static killing machine. Not one wall, but 2. An inner one 30 meters high, a lower outer one. The space between them was an extermination zone. If an army breached the first barrier, they were trapped in that corridor, easy targets for thousands of archers from above. No cover, no escape, only death. And they diverted water to create a 40-meter-wide moat surrounding the entire city. No battering ram could approach without first building a massive bridge. How many bricks for 30-meter walls surrounding 700 hectares? Tens of millions, maybe 100 million. Each brick made by hand. Mix mud with straw, press into molds, unmold without breaking. Dry in the sun for days. A worker made perhaps 200 bricks daily. He alone would take nearly 1,400 years to make enough. That's why they needed 50,000 slaves. It was brutal mathematics. The Jewish prisoners had heard Nahum's prophecy. God had promised to destroy Nineveh, but they were being forced to build it. How do you maintain faith in destruction while you're building the thing that will be destroyed? Some lost faith, but others understood something profound. Each brick was future evidence of God's power. When these indestructible walls fell, no one would say it was due to poor construction. They fell because God fulfills what He promises. Nineveh had grown so much that the local river couldn't keep up. Sennacherib knew, in a siege, cutting water is tactic number 1. He decided his city would never go thirsty. The only clean source was in the mountains far away. Between the spring and the palace, rugged terrain full of chasms. The answer was the Jerwan aqueduct, over 2 million carved stone blocks, creating an impermeable bridge. 500 years before Rome dreamed of being an empire. Each block cut with precision, transported up to 50 kilometers, lifted and positioned to maintain perfect gradient. Too flat, water stagnates. Too steep, it erodes the channel. Without modern instruments, only ropes, plumb lines, and pure mathematics. When the water arrived, Sennacherib carved into the stones that he was Lord of the Waters. It wasn't just engineering. It was declaring that he, not the gods, controlled life. Sennacherib commissioned the Lamassu, giant winged bulls with human heads, for the gates. 50 tons of stone each. Wooden sleds sliding on prepared tracks. Men running ahead pouring oil. Hundreds pulling ropes. And on top of the statue, a coordinator beating drums. If they didn't move in perfect synchrony, the sled would tip and crush dozens. It was a deadly dance coordinated by sound. When these monsters arrived at Nineveh, the message was clear. We move mountains. What will we do to your army? Sennacherib designed his palace without rival to cause panic. Ambassadors entered the first war propaganda museum in history. Kilometers of reliefs showing with sadistic detail what Assyria did to those who didn't pay taxes. Cities burning, prisoners flayed alive, nobles impaled. The most impressive room, the siege of Lachish, a city of Judah mentioned in 2 Kings 18. The walls show the Assyrian army massacring Jews. Families separated. Leaders begging for mercy. You entered for a diplomatic meeting and left psychologically defeated. Who carved those scenes? The Jewish prisoners themselves, forced to carve their own defeat, working to glorify the king who destroyed their homes. The psychological torment was calculated. You're a Jewish craftsman. You see your city fall. Now you carve in perfect detail the scene of your family being massacred. If you refuse, you die. If you do it poorly, you die. If you do it well, you immortalize your humiliation. But some maintained faith. While they carved Assyrian victory, they whispered prophecies. Each chisel strike was silent resistance, because they knew these walls won't last. When they fall, these images of pride will become testimony of arrogance before the fall. How does the largest city on the planet disappear so completely that 200 years later a Greek army marched over it without knowing? In 612 BC, Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians besieged Nineveh. The siege lasted months. The defenders mocked. We have water from the mountains. Food for years. We'll never surrender. Then nature struck back. A torrential rain out of season made the Tigris overflow violently. The water struck the mud brick foundations. The surface bricks were hard, but the mortar between them and the lower layers contained mud not completely fired. The water touched them and began dissolving them. Under the guards' feet, invisible, chemistry worked. Mud returning to mud. Foundations softening like wax. Then a section of wall, 20 meters wide, 30 high, simply tilted and fell. Literal fulfillment of Nahum 2:6. The river gates are thrown open, and the palace collapses. Through the breach rushed the water, followed by the invading army. Total massacre. Fire-consuming palaces. The city built on the suffering of millions was destroyed with the same violence it exported for centuries. The palace had a giant library with clay tablets. If it hadn't been burned, the clay would have disintegrated with moisture. But the enemy fire accidentally baked the library, transforming fragile clay into hard ceramic. The fire that should have erased Assyrian memory was what preserved it to be read today, 2,600 years later. And the destruction was so complete that 200 years later, when Xenophon asked what those hills of rubble were, locals shrugged. Ancient ruins, no one knows what. The city that was to last forever had been erased. Even its name was forgotten. The Israelite prisoner from the beginning never saw Nineveh's fall. He probably died decades earlier, but perhaps he had a moment of clarity. Each brick he placed wasn't building Assyrian eternity. It was building prophetic evidence. Because when those walls fell, no one would say it was due to poor construction. They fell because there are things no engineering can sustain. When you build on arrogance, when you raise your city as a challenge to heaven, when you declare that no God can touch you, then it doesn't matter how thick your walls are. It doesn't matter how deep your moat. It doesn't matter how many millions of bricks you use. Water will find the crack. Fire will find the fuel. and prophecy will find its fulfillment. Nineveh teaches us, no matter how high your walls or how rich your empire, arrogance always precedes the fall. The Assyrians thought they had conquered nature, but they forgot there is someone greater. Someone who created the mountains they climbed. Someone who commands the rains they tried to control. And when that someone decrees judgment, there is no wall high enough. Today, the ruins of Nineveh are silent testimony. Archaeologists walk among bricks made by Jewish prisoners 2,700 years ago. They touch reliefs carved by sculptors who wept. They measure walls that promised eternity, but didn't last 300 years. And on tablets baked by the fire of destruction, they find Assyrian records confirming what the Bible says. Archaeology validates scripture. History confirms prophecy. The ruins preach the sermon Nahum wrote. If this account of brutal engineering and exact prophetic fulfillment impacted you, show it now. Give this film a warm like. That button is your vote for more biblical stories in this cinematic format. Share this video with someone who needs to see how God fulfills exactly what He promises, even if it takes decades, even if it seems impossible. And subscribe, because if this video goes viral, if you show us you want more, I promise we'll return with more impactful accounts. The fall of Jericho, the Tower of Babel, Sodom and Gomorrah is stories of divine judgment, told with all the intensity and historical precision they deserve. Your like decides if this continues. Your share decides how many people will see that the Bible is historical record, validated by archaeology. Nineveh fell exactly as God promised. Each brick made by Jewish prisoners became evidence that God fulfills what He promises. See you in the next biblical film.